Hi, everybody. We want to welcome you to Purpose People. It's our next podcast, and I'm really pleased to have Olly Reid, my co-founder at Humans.
Hi, Darrell.
How you doing?
I'm really good, thank you, yeah.
Thanks for coming on the show. What we're going to talk about is a little bit about Humans, how it started, and how we can actually help people. Obviously, we're talking about purpose. So purpose is about finding what really makes you tick and then double down on that. And one of the ways we do that is with Humans. It's an exciting movement that we're creating. And I've brought Olly on just to talk a little bit more in detail about what Humans is and how it started. So over to you.
Yeah, so where did Humans start? I think it started about 13 years old. I had a careers advice meeting, and I remember sitting down and the advisor asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I told her that I wanted to be a teacher, and she burst out laughing. It was an ouch moment, but it was also a moment where something really interesting happened. I think that was the first day that my own perception of who I was and what I was capable of was projected via somebody else's voice. And it was that realization that it might be okay for me to talk to myself that way, but it's not okay for other people to outwardly kind of dampen my spirit or my aspiration. And so that was the day I met my inner champion, if you like. And I went on this kind of transformational journey of exploring who I was and what I could achieve. And in doing so, I guess the approach to Humans was born, because I decided in that day, in that moment, that if I had a goal or a purpose, it was to make sure that other people didn't feel the way that I'd been made to feel that day.
Yeah. And knowing a little bit about your story, that then led you from a decision in that careers room to then going essentially on the journey to better yourself. So you had multiple jobs and training. Do you want to share a little bit about that journey?
Yeah.
Well, you went to uni as well, didn't you, before then?
I did eventually, yeah. And I actually started, my first job was at McDonald's. And so it was almost that the careers advisor was right in the first instance. Yeah. The only difference was that they probably thought McDonald's was my best. That was my outcome in life, and that would be probably where I'd be for the rest of my career.
Yeah.
What they didn't know is that kind of journey of self-discovery and self-development led to me taking every opportunity that was on the table and seeking them out when there were no opportunities. And that's how I kind of built my career, which was finding opportunities, taking them, living outside of my comfort zone and just learning. And a lot of that ethos now lives within Humans and how we operate.
What I found interesting about your story is you talked about working at McDonald's, and you talked about other people driving in the drive-through, almost mocking you for the type of role that you actually had. And I think when you commit to purpose, is that aspect of sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards, and not everybody understands what you do. So you just talk us through how you felt in that environment.
Yeah. So being in a drive-through and seeing people that you go to school with coming through and, laughing at you, you work at McDonald's, and you're like, I do, but I know where I'm heading, and I know that I've got ambition. And that kind of 2 steps back mentality, it was a little bit further along the journey. I went from McDonald's to Green King, from Green King to Wetherspoon. So I was ticking off all the jobs that, you talk to successful people and those are the jobs they don't want.
Yeah.
Yet actually the skills that I learned in those environments have underpinned almost everything. But I remember one day at Wetherspoons, I was managing the pub at the time, and I've opened up and I had tears streaming down my face. No real idea where they'd come from, but they caused this kind of almost immediate reflection. And it was almost an outward portrayal that I weren't where I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so I went and sat back at my desk and wrote my resignation there and then, having no idea what I was going to do next, but just knowing that there was something that I needed to go and try. And 2 weeks later, I sat in an induction at college on my way to getting a qualification that I needed to go to university.
And I've seen that with people where they come to that crisis moment, that moment where they have to make the big decision. And that big decision is, you know what, this isn't it. And I have to make a decision that actually, I don't know where I'm going, but I've got to do something about now. And it's quite interesting just doing the podcast and talking to people. It seems that people get to that crisis point and they're brave enough to run with it. And there are other people that get to that crisis point and just carry on as normal. So what tipped you over the edge to say, you know what, I'm going to pursue this?
I think the more I I developed as an individual and the more qualifications I gained. So I did quite a lot for apprenticeships and things like that, work-based learning. And every time I passed another course or achieved another qualification, I was almost moving myself beyond where other people thought was possible and capable for me.
Yeah.
And once I'd broken through those barriers, it was almost that realization that if I can do this, then what can't I do?
Yeah.
And so that exploration then was actually, I've proved through my action that anything is possible. And I guess now I look at other people and I believe now that if it was possible for me, where I came from and the upbringing I had and the schooling I had, then I believe it's possible for other people. And again, that comes through humans in terms of helping people to understand themselves and their own barriers and then helping them to negotiate and move around them.
And when, we do a thing called Humans Talks, and the Humans Talks is we meet on the third Monday of every month. It's in Bristol. It's at the Square Club. And we have people telling their story. And obviously myself and Olly were the first people to tell our story. But when you made that decision in your Humans Talk, you tell the story about your journey for university. Can you just share that? Because sometimes on the other side of where we want to get to, there is a journey in itself.
Yeah. So all of the things I went to get to university, there's a story that I tell, which I'll try and get the wording right. It's called car, bike, walk, bike, dog, uni, I think is what I call it. And that's a journey of that 1 year at college where I started off having just left my job at Wetherspoons. I had it paid quite well for the work that I was doing, and I had a car. And week number one, I arrive at college in my car, park in the multi-story car park, and walk across the bridge into college like I'm a hero.
Yeah.
Life is good. By month number 2, I was struggling to pay to park in the city centre. So I was driving in as close as I could to where the double yellow line started and parking there. And then I'd walk 20 minutes into college. By month 4, I couldn't afford to put petrol in the car. So I was hopping on my bike.
Wow.
And then the bike broke. So I walked. And then I got the bike fixed and started cycling again. And there was this one Sunday where I was picking up an extra shift at work and I got attacked by a dog while I was cycling. It ripped my only pair of work trousers, if you like, ones that I'd still had from McDonald's, actually.
Wow.
Big puncture wound in my leg. And, most people at that point would have gone, enough's enough. This just isn't meant for me.
Yeah.
And it actually turned me the other way. It actually gave me more motivation, I think. So I continued through all of that, finally passed college and off I went to university thinking, right, this is going to be a nice plain sailing. I've done the hard work, and it ended up being the opposite.
Yeah.
And so through that university journey, again, suffered with illness, financial hardship, injury. I damaged the ACL in my knee and couldn't do the sport that I loved anymore.
Yeah.
And so again, mindset-wise and personal development-wise, I had to learn a lot about myself and how I thought and utilize that to take me to a place where, if my back's against the wall, I come out swinging. And what I've realized about some of the most successful people I know are ones that behave like their back's against the wall when it's not.
Yeah.
And so coming back to your question about, bravery, I think sometimes you don't learn how to be brave by reading about bravery.
Yeah.
You learn how to be brave by completing acts of bravery.
Yeah.
And so that kind of being comfortable, being uncomfortable is part of how I live and operate now. So I live outside my comfort zone more often than not.
Yeah, I talk about it like, I think we've all got scars. That every one of us has got a scar. I've got a scar on my back. I know exactly where I got it from. And those sorts of things are like scars that we remember. They almost build up like this catalogue of overcoming events. And I think it's not to forget about those things because look at the scar and remember what got you there and what got you through. We all get scars and we all have memories, but, it worked out okay. Like that cut on my back, for example, is like, oh, am I dying or whatever? I wasn't, but it was a case of eventually that's going to heal and it'll be fine and we'll carry on. But sometimes we just move on and not forget. But there's so many great lessons that we can learn from overcoming previously to help us for our next challenge. That's how I see it.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I've learned is that when you become comfortable with worst case scenario, nothing seems as scary anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think that day when I left Wetherspoons, in my head, the worst case scenario is that I'd be back working at Wetherspoons. If I failed college, nobody could take away the qualification or experience that I had to date. And therefore, worst case scenario is I was back doing what I was doing. And if I was comfortable with that, then actually the stepping stones to success became much more attainable.
So you obviously get through this journey called university and stuff. Yeah. And then, what was the qualification you ended up with? And then what was next?
So I guess the next part of that story was I was on what was called a 3+1 course. And so the 3 was a 3-year degree. And the +1 was a guaranteed space on a PGC, which would qualify me as a teacher, providing that I passed the 3 years. Now, what actually happened is, as we were coming towards the end of the 3 years, the government withdrew the funding for the PGCE.
Oh, wow.
So for somebody like me from what would be described as a disadvantaged background, no family support financially through university or anything like that, it was very much the door is closed and it's tough luck.
Yeah.
And again, utilizing some of the principles and mindsets, I kind of had this feeling of injustice, but also this element of empowerment and control. And so as soon as that decision came out, I sought to find a solution. I refused not to be a teacher at that point. I'd come so far. And about 2 weeks later, I was speaking to a friend of mine who was telling me about the student union elections. I'd never really been involved in it, never really heard of it. And he basically said, if you're involved in this, then you have a seat at the academic table and you can be the person that supports the development of policy, the things that happen to students. Mm-hmm. A couple of weeks after that, I was running in the student union elections to be the education president.
Wow. Ladies and gents, this is the new Prime Minister.
No aspiration for that one, I don't think.
No, but so being in that role and then shaping whatever, you talk about mindset. So did you always know that you had this mindset thing, or was it something learned, or did you just start applying some principles and just become more and more successful? Because you talk about mindset a lot, and it's obviously got you to where you've got to from backgrounds that are not always easy. So how did you fall into that? If I get my mindset right, I can really affect where I'm going forward.
I think it was definitely learned. I don't think it was something that was inherent. I think it was a combination of attempting things and failing and seeing how the world around me kind of changed.
Yeah.
And the first time I became aware that I was developing this mindset, I'd gone back home while I was at university and bumped into an old friend. And, we were having that conversation, how's life? How are things? And this person was saying, my job's a bit crap. I don't really like it. I'm not really sure that my partner's the one that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. And, they had all of these kind of moans and gripes and things. And anyway, we had a conversation. And about 6 months later, I went back and happened to bump into the same person again. And we had an identical conversation.
Wow.
Literally identical. It was the same gripes, the same complaints, the same, whinging and blaming about the life that they were living. Yeah. And then he said, how are things with you? And anyway, in those 6 months, my life had changed quite dramatically. You're at university and all of these experiences are happening, and I was doing loads and loads of different things. And I kind of thought, well, what's the difference between myself and this person? And I think that was the first time that I realized that I had developed a mindset of seeking opportunity and a mindset of growth. And so when I reflected on the experiences that I had and all the things that I'd been through, I realized that actually there was a strength and resilience in my mindset that other people hadn't got for whatever reason. And so going back to what I was saying about, if you backed into a corner, you come out punching, I think mentally and mindset-wise, that's where I kind of got myself to. So I found this, when other people see problems, I see an opportunity to solve.
Yeah.
When other people see obstacles, I see an opportunity to find a way around it, whether to go over, underneath, straight through it, whatever it needs to be. And so I don't see problems or obstacles in the same way as other people. And I think that's part of the mindset that I've developed now.
It's definitely a champion mindset, in the fact that you could play the victim. You could have said, well, I'm not from the best background. I'm now working at McDonald's. I'm working in here. But but you saw it as a journey. And one of the things I encourage to a lot of people is they might be an amazing photographer, but they're not doing that full time yet. But they still are an amazing photographer. And if they happen to work in Sainsbury's, Morrison's or wherever, it's a journey to that role. But first and foremost, they are who they want to be, which is their purpose. These things are vehicles to get there. And I think some people get stuck in that route of, I'm not going to be stuck in shelves forever. I'm never going to get out of this. And as you said, the contrast is people make progress and other people just stay where they are. You know, and did you experience that? The people that were mocking you, let's say in McDonald's, did you see much progression in them, or do you see them where they were? Did they stay in that place?
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot that are stood in the same place.
Yeah.
I think in life you're doing kind of one of three things. You're either standing still, you're kind of drifting through life, or you're progressively seeking to move forwards. And I've built a life now where I sit firmly in progressing always.
Yeah.
And it's not around financial success. It's about defining my own meaning of success. And I think a lot of people find a fear in being brave enough to say, I'm attempting to do something.
Yeah.
And so they don't talk about it. And I've been there myself as well, not telling people what I've been up to for fear of outside influence or other people's perspectives changing the way I perceive myself or the way that I'm going about things. And, one of the things, again, that comes through humans now is that we've enabled this space where you can walk into the room and say, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing in life or where I'm going or how I'm going to get to where I'm intending to get to. But that's appreciated. And you get a round of applause for being honest with it. Mm-hmm. And so what I've realized is that we all ultimately feel the same, right? We all want success in whatever way, shape or form that means something to us. And so, again, I think it's about being brave and saying, actually, no, I'm working on me and that's okay.
It goes back to that thing of progress, not perfection. And obviously you now go into your first job. Is that right? You've got your qualification, and I know there's a story behind. Weirdly enough, we actually rebranded that school. And they left on, I think it was the July, and they come back in the September. It had a new brand and new values and messaging. So it's quite interesting to hear the other side of that story and the journey that they were on as a school in terms of how they handled pupils and stuff. So yeah, just share a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so I guess this part of the story is, having been through all of those things that we've talked about, I did become a teacher, and it was the worst job I ever had. And it's strange because obviously this was the purpose that I set out to achieve. It was this place in life where I knew that my purpose was to be a teacher. And then I arrived at this school, and what I wanted was to be able to contribute positively to the uplift and development of children from disadvantaged backgrounds that, perhaps didn't have the best start in life, but could be supported to develop a mindset that helped them to go on and achieve. And putting the school to one side for a second, what I've actually found, I think, was that the national curriculum wasn't set up to support children from deprived or disadvantaged backgrounds. And so I found myself having to operate in a world that I didn't agree with. And so the teaching that I did, I felt the children really made progress socially and emotionally, but not necessarily in grades, but it was a grades that was perceived as a success.
Yeah.
And so it quickly became a place where I knew that I couldn't thrive because it didn't align with my own values in terms of how we supported children. But it caused me to kind of go into this place of, okay, well, if this isn't my purpose, then what is? I haven't gone through everything I've been through to find a job that I didn't like and to not contribute to development. And so when I kind of sat down and thought about it, I realized that I'd put teaching as a concept on this pedestal.
Yeah.
When I broke it down to understand what teaching is, well, actually, it's the sharing of knowledge. It's the uplifting of spirit.
Yeah.
It's the development of others.
Yeah.
And what I realized is that every job I'd ever had, from McDonald's all the way through, there was an element of teaching, supporting, training, encouraging. And so when I looked at that teaching role and made the decision that it weren't the right environment for me, that's when I kind of looked and went, okay, well, what are my values and what is my ethos and what is this environment not giving me? And that's when I found my way to the Prince's Trust then, because the values of being non-judgmental really aligned with who I was and how I saw the world. And I realized I could contribute utilizing the teaching experience that I had and the skills that I developed, but in a completely different environment, but to achieve the same purpose.
So what was the trigger then? What was the thing that tipped you over there to say teaching isn't for me? What was that snapping point, that thing that propelled you to say, you know what, this isn't fitting?
There was a conversation with a parent, and the parent worked 3 jobs, I think. And they came into school one day and said, I'm taking my child out of the school. And I kind of said, well, you know, why? They're making good progress. And the parent said, I've asked to swap an after school club and I've been told I can't, which obviously affects my ability to work. And if I can't work, then I can't afford to pay for, you know, our life.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you know, that can't be right. Let me go and have a conversation. And I went and had a conversation, and I was basically met with the child's low ability anyway. So if they leave, it does our numbers a favor. And I knew in that moment that I was leaving. You know, if you're working in a deprived area and that is the mentality, then there's no hope for any of us, right? Yeah. And again, I've taken a long time now to kind of reflect on that journey and reflect on that experience. And it's almost further cemented the importance that I place on my own values and live in them. Yeah. Because I genuinely believe that the people in that school had the best intention. Yeah. But I also believe that there was a system that sat around it that was pressurizing them to behave and act in a way that wasn't conducive to their own heart.
I think that was it. I mean, like my wife, Claire, she taught, you know, and the very key thing is the thing that they really love to do is actually teach. They don't do a lot of. It's more administration, it's more input into things, and it's all around the figures and the numbers and stuff like that. So I've seen how that's compromised their interactions. Yeah. They've got that results thing in the back of their head the whole time, which clearly, if you're pressured by results, you're going to do what it takes. And if let's say, their pay is reflective on how successful they are, then you can see why people begin to compromise in that system. Or, as a lot of people do, they transition out. So you move from there then into Prince's Trust, which is, you know, a phenomenal organisation. I know you got us in there a while ago and we did a workshop there, but tell us about that journey, the Prince's Trust, and the impact that you had there.
Yeah, so I think that was the moment in my life where the aspiration that I had, the experience of who I was, and then the success that I felt all kind of came together. Yeah. It was this place where everything about who I was appreciated. Yeah. And so it wasn't just about a job, actually. It was an environment where I could go in as Olly and be appreciated for it. And I remember actually turning up for the interview, and I was wearing a suit. And you walk into the Prince's Trust, which is, again, this place where they're supporting, you know, children or young people from disadvantaged and deprived backgrounds. And I'm there in a suit. And, you know, they asked me, are you okay? And I said, honestly, I feel like a bit of a fraud. You know, I've come for an interview at the Prince's Trust and I'm wearing a suit, which is immediately alienating the people I'm here to support. Yeah. And so I'd rather take it off. But it was this place where I think I flourished because I was able to be authentically myself. Yeah. I didn't feel like I could do that in teaching, you know, being mixed heritage, you know, everything from the way that I cut my hair to the way that I spoke and everything in between. I felt I had to adapt, rightly or wrongly. Whereas at the Prince's Trust, it didn't feel like that at all. Mm. And so I think that was probably when I started sharing my own humans talk, if you like, that little bit of my own background and the journey that I'd been on, and found that it inspired these young people to believe that if this person can, then maybe I could be this person.
It's an interesting when we talk about suits. It makes me smile because when I met Claire, so I used to work in a creative team, so I used to dress like this all the time. But when we went out, I used to dress up. And I had a suit jacket on and stuff like that. And so I was going to clubs dressed up in a suit and stuff. And when Claire first saw me, her exact words were, she thought I was a Russian poet. Who is this guy that goes to a nightclub in a suit top? Because I was so fed up of wearing this all the time. Yeah. It was like I dress differently. And, suits and that way, it's amazing how the suit and tie is like been a staple of success. And now finally, I think everyone's dropped it. It's very rare that you do see suit and ties and stuff like that. So you can be who you are, and the work environment's a change where, if you go and see the bank manager, you've got to wear a suit and tie, and it's fake, right? It's not authentic in any way, shape, or form. We're just faking it till we make it. You know? And so that was it. So you being able to, even just dressing differently, it was like, right, I can actually be who I am. Yeah. So there's the Prince's Trust. You're now doing what you're really enjoying. How long did you stay there for?
2 years.
2 years. And then obviously what was the catalyst to move you on from beyond there?
So an interesting catalyst, I guess, in the sense that my wife and I thought we were pregnant.
Okay.
And so again, you look at this point in your life and you go, okay, we're renting a house, not a very nice one at the time. Actually, it was so cold we actually had to cling film the windows in this house to try and keep the heating. Yeah, and you find out that you think you're pregnant and you go, oh, okay, we're gonna have to do something here, right? Yeah. This isn't the environment that I envisaged bringing up our children in, and so. It just kind of caused this moment again of, right, we need to take action. We need to utilize that mindset and consider what else is out there. And it kind of took me down this path of considering what might be next. And so I always think in life, there's different experiences that motivate you and cause you to do certain things. And there are situations that cause you to operate out with your core motivators, if you like.
Yeah.
And so the motivator in this moment was, being completely honest, at the Prince's Trust, they're not going to pay the best wages, being a charity.
Yeah.
And so I had to consider, well, actually, I need to go and earn some more money here.
Yeah.
And so I looked for about 1 minute on one day, and I found this job, which if somebody could have written a job description for me at the time, this was it.
Right.
And it paid me significantly more than what I was earning at the Prince's Trust. And it was that moment where if I'd looked at other jobs, I just don't think I would have gone, because I think the internal values and the alignment with the Prince's Trust was so clear and obvious for me that I just wouldn't have been willing, for the sake of money, to just go somewhere, anywhere.
Yeah.
But I found this role at a company called Entrepreneurial Spark, which was helping entrepreneurs to thrive.
Yeah.
And everything about it aligned again with who I was. And for me to make that move was a little bit of a no-brainer.
Yeah. And, and that's kind of where our journey began, where I was one of the people on Entrepreneurial Spark and worked, I think, probably 18 months. I think I was part of it. And then there was a little break, and then it became a bank. It became NatWest's thing. And then obviously I was invited back, and we managed to connect, and he was my coach. So he's got me to where I am today. And one of the things I thank Olly for was where I find myself today was that one thing that you said to me was this. You said, are you a business owner or an entrepreneur? And I've been trying to wrestle and figure out, but I couldn't put my finger on why things weren't quite clicking.
Yeah.
And it's when you had hit me with that, I knew I was an entrepreneur. And all of a sudden these possibilities began to open up, because creation, I thought, was it, but it was just one of a much bigger picture. And, that whole limiting belief and stuff like, can I do it? Can I run two businesses or whatever? And you took me on that journey through the coaching at Entrepreneurial Spark and NatWest that began to get me thinking differently and begin to embrace a journey that was completely uncomfortable, needed all my mindset, if you like, but actually spoke deeper to my heart, that actually this is what purpose looks like. So yeah, tell us what you do within that environment generally, and then how we met. That'd be cool.
Yeah. So I guess interestingly, thinking back to when I first joined Entrepreneurial Spark, and I think you were probably there at the time, is that obviously from teaching had knocked my confidence quite a lot. Being in that environment had really kind of caused some of my old perceptions of who I was to kind of come back to the forefront. You know, you come out of that environment and you go, am I good enough to go and do this somewhere else? And so the Prince's Trust, if that was kind of first stage of building up this confidence again, Entrepreneurial Spark was the second phase of that.
Yeah.
And so I remember arriving almost day number one and being in this environment where you've got to practice what you preach. You're teaching people about growth mindset, but you're coming off the back of dented confidence almost.
Yeah.
And so you start to have these conversations and you start to realize that everybody's got those same inner critics, if you like.
Yeah.
And I guess that environment for me was, again, one where I turned up authentically as who I was. But secondly, my role was to inspire the people that were inspiring me.
Yeah.
And so there was this really interesting dual process occurring there. And the more I coached people and the more I was my authentic self and asked questions like the one that you mentioned, the more I realized that I had a skill and I saw the world in a different way. And so the other thing that I've learned about myself in certain environments is that I think differently. When I was younger, that was criticized and judged.
Yeah.
Whereas now in that environment, especially at Entrepreneurial Spark, that thinking differently was applauded and it became a superpower rather than a weakness.
And that's what I love about the environment, you know, that being part of that program, you were around loads of people that thought completely differently. And, you know, that's one thing I miss. You know, thankfully we've got humans now, so we managed to pull that back together. But that whole journey of being around people that are essentially all eagles, they're all looking to fly and create something from nothing and going through that pain and that trouble. So it's not about perfection. Again, it was like everyone discussing, I've had a really bad day, or this person's quit, or this client's gone, and being able to talk about it openly because everyone was going through the same thing.
Yeah.
It was a really, for me, it's a really positive environment. And even through lockdown, because that was difficult, that was a lifeline. It was another one of those things, being online and connecting with the group. You know, it's just good to say, you know what, it's really lonely sat here locked up, you know?
Yeah. And I think that journey kind of probably taught both of us a little bit about the power of community and the power of having shared and aligned values and ways of working. And that community that we built. And I remember, again, we had this moment where we'd had some entrepreneurs that were around for quite a long time, substantial amount of time. And they almost felt like it was their program and they were, you know, the longest servers and therefore they should be involved in decision making. And we decided to try and make this community group that would influence how we developed as a community. And it didn't go very well. It was almost a little bit of a feeling of entitlement. And when we kind of sat and reflected, why isn't this working? What we found was that we had put in place values and purpose, but on the basis that people had been around for a long time, rather than looking at who they were as individuals and the behaviors they were already showing. And so we went, right, okay, let's try it again. And what we did is we identified people in the existing community that were already displaying the values that we wanted to see. And one by one, we picked them out. We picked 4 people and we sat them down individually and we said, look, here's what you've been doing. And we think that's incredible. We notice that you're the person that when everybody's kind of sat on their own, you're the one that goes over to them and involves them and includes them. And we notice that you're the person that's, you know, developing the social activity and forging relationships on a deeper level than just business. And so we picked these 4 people. We sat them down and had these conversations. And we said, we've got an opportunity for you. We'd like you to consider being part of this new community group. The response couldn't have been any different from the first time. It was no entitlement. It was, I can't believe you've chosen me.
Wow.
Of all the people here, you've chosen me. Thank you so much.
Wow.
And that's when we knew that this was going to be something different. And that group went on to launch a first community event. They went on to start to really build that community. And we never looked back. And so when we think about that community ethos now, we know that it starts with people and we know that it starts with purpose. And we know that it starts by being underpinned with really clear values.
So that community created those community events, and that essentially was the birthing of what we call humans. So do you want us to tell us about the format, how it worked, and then how you went from running an event to then say, hey, let's start a business with it?
Yeah, so Humans, if you like, started out as a series of talks amongst entrepreneurs, and we kind of did some talks, and they were about all sorts of things, and people would talk about their businesses and things. But what I found is that it was the personal human connection that sat underneath those stories that was the magic. And so as I kind of sat and listened to these talks week after week, I started to develop this idea, well, actually, what if we moved past the business and started to look at the person?
Yeah.
Who are they? What have they overcome? What are their obstacles? Where did they come from? What are they passionate about? And I guess that's when Humans was born. And so we found this acronym of honest, uplifting, motivational, aspirational nourishment for the soul. And we
spells humans, by the way.
And we provided this platform where people could step out from behind what they did and venture into who they are.
Yeah.
And the first few we did were incredible. We had no theme, no topic. We just had really clear values of how we wanted the talks to be positioned.
Tears.
We had
that was
tears.
The big thing. People keep getting emotional doing it. Even when I did mine, I've done it a couple of times now, and every time it just hits you, because you're just sharing who you are. So
yeah, and I think that emotion comes from the fact that you don't usually share that part of who you are in what would be deemed a professional environment.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff stays locked in your head and you deal with it yourself. And sometimes not even our partners or our friends know that we're holding on to some of that emotional baggage. And so Humans created this platform for people to share in a safe environment, again, knowing that it would be applauded and appreciated rather than criticized and judged. And I think that's when we knew we had something special, where we saw not only the speaker's reaction, but the audience reaction.
Yeah.
So if there was laughter on the stage, there was laughter in the audience. If there was tears on the stage, there was tears in the audience.
Yeah, yeah.
And we saw these people go on this incredible journey. And then the more I kind of thought about this platform that we'd started, the more I realized is actually what sits underneath that is human development and personal growth. And so when I looked at my experience, my own journey, and my journey through teaching, the qualifications that I had, the background in human behavior, human psychology, mindset, human development, well, actually, it fitted together really as this puzzle of developing humans both personally and professionally. And now what I've almost got to as well is that we develop humans' well-being both personally and professionally. Yeah. And so we're providing now a space where people can grow as who they are, but develop skills that have impact throughout their whole lives. And that's where the motto of happier, healthier, smarter, and kinder comes from. These kind of 4 areas that we all aspire to be.
Well, I think that's the thing. We've got this community of entrepreneurs trying to build businesses, and then we moved into the people behind the businesses, and then now you've got a movement where exactly happier, healthier, smarter, and kinder are normally the first 4 things that go when you're an entrepreneur. You're not happy because things aren't quite right. Your wellness goes, your health goes, so to speak. Smarter, you don't invest in yourself, and then as a result of those 3 things, you're pretty much grumpy. Your love and relationships suffer, those kinds of things. So what I love about Humans as an event was that it got people talking about who they really were, rather than this, again, fake it till you make it, presenting an image but not really being true to it. It's almost like wearing suits on the outside, but on the inside you're someone completely different. So we did a national event, if I remember, and in the middle of the pandemic, and it was just after that national event, and we began seriously having conversations about how far could we take this, because it had such an influence. In the middle of the pandemic, you're speaking to quite a few people from Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, England, all online together, all hearing these stories, and everyone going, this is incredible.
Yeah, so I actually remember pre-pandemic giving you a little bit of a nudge and saying, look, there's something I need to talk to you about. And that was Humans.
Yeah.
And then obviously the pandemic hit, and I instantly went from working from home on my own. All of the values of Humans now is around community and being together. And I think when we kind of sat down and started to talk about it, I think we both kind of saw it as our responsibility, especially during a pandemic. If not now, then when?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, when we saw the impact that it had across the pandemic, and seeing the world start to open up, and seeing if we could take that feeling of community into the real world, if you like, I think we both kind of knew that there was something really special there. And the more that we shared it with people, the more that they felt and saw it too.
Yeah. So this is so then essentially we got together, we had a talk, and we eventually talking for about 9 months on Zoom every single week, planning and plotting and building the brand and working out what the message was. So just explain what Humans actually is. So people that want to get involved can get involved and discover more. But at its core, what is it? Just explain what Humans is.
So at its core, it's a personal and professional development tool. And it essentially helps to take knowledge and theory to action and habit. So when you think about how people build a happier, healthier, smarter and kinder life, most of the things that people should be doing, they already know about. So it's not rocket science. Yeah. We all know that we should be eating better and we should have better nutrition. We all know that we should be drinking more water. We all know that we should be doing less of the bad stuff and more of the good stuff.
Yeah.
But the reality for most people is that they don't do it consistently. And so what we find through human psychology and behavior is that if you can change somebody's habit and that changes their behavior and that changes the way they think and feel, then actually you can positively impact somebody's happiness by changing a habit that felt unrelated at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Humans now provides tools, it provides a community, it provides a 12-month development program to organizations and individuals that helps them to proactively build a happier life through the development of habits. So we've got our Human Challenge journals, which are... Hang on. He's got one.
Here's one.
Oh, thank you very much. So this is habit-driven at the front.
Yeah.
And that's things like making sure you get outdoors, which, again, is really important at the moment, especially as more people are working hybrid. Making sure you're getting enough water and making sure you're eating your 5 a day as starting points for that framework of development. Then it's got things in there that are backed by NHS guidelines. So things like we know that we need to exercise more frequently. So it builds that framework of habit development and gives you a really simple way of starting to track it.
Yeah.
Now, when you've got that evidence and you've got it in your journal, you can actually start to see patterns of behavior. When is it happening? Why is it happening? How do I change it? If, for example, I know that I haven't got my water in 3-4 days in a row, then I know that's going to have a psychological effect on my efficiency. What we also know about humans is they love a challenge. And so at the back of the book, what we've got is 16 weeks worth of challenges where you'll scratch a panel. It'll give you a challenge, something that actively helps you to become happier and healthier.
Yeah.
And it'll get you out of your house and doing things that, again, are conducive to building a better life.
Excellent. And then obviously that supports essentially what we call a group of people. What's it called and how does that work?
So we've got our human catalysts.
Yeah.
This is a community of leaders that are committed to developing themselves as individuals and as leaders, safe in the knowledge that better leaders will build better businesses. So we think quite often about organizations and how do they develop the culture and well-being of their teams, of their staff, of their organizations. Well, if the person at the top is fixed mindset, operating on old belief systems, and not willing to get out of their comfort zone and show a vulnerability, then the rest of the organization inevitably becomes the same way.
Yeah.
And so Human Catalyst has this kind of underpinning value of personal development and understanding that each individual has a wider impact in the work that they do and the way that they think and feel.
Yeah.
So our Human Catalyst, it started with 10 founding members. Amongst those founding members, they run businesses, everything from Marmalade Trust, which is the UK's leading loneliness charity, to Women of a Certain Stage, which supports women through the menopause, helping them to understand the impact and how it affects their confidence and building people back up, but also helping organizations to understand how that's going to impact their employees. To food and ethical farming, sustainability and reuse. And so what we've found is a core group of people that have impact because of who they are as individuals. They have impact because of the organizations they lead, and they have the ripple effect of impact because of the communities that they serve.
Yeah.
And so moving into the next phase, Human Catalyst is becoming a community for people to thrive and have a safe space to talk about their challenges. So you don't have to be purpose-led to be part of Human Catalyst, but you do have to be willing to open yourself up to your own vulnerabilities and ready to learn and contribute positively to others.
Yeah, the key thing for me is the Human Catalyst group brings a certain degree of clarity that restores people's confidence. Yeah. And what you'll find in those groups, you can't share in normal groups, let's say, but the guys have been vulnerable in that group. I'm not going to disclose what's said in there, but there's been some dramatic changes from when someone was in a certain space, and then over a period of 6 months, just see them completely different because they've been able to say what was on their heart and on their mind and be talked through what life could look like on the other side, and then go, you know what, I need to make those changes, and just believe that they could make it happen by the support that was around them.
Yeah, I think quite often in our lives, we try and make decisions, big decisions in isolation. And so again, what Human Catalyst does is if you're thinking of making a decision in your personal life or thinking about making a decision in your business life, and you've got 9 other people that you respect, that are saying, if this was my problem and this was my intention, here's what I think I would do. It gives you the confidence to go and get it done. And so again, that safe environment and that peer-to-peer support helps us as individuals to grow and to flourish and be confident doing it. And so, like you say, sometimes you'll get the pat on the back that you need and the pep talk that you need. Other times you'll get the challenge, but it always comes from the right place. It comes from the heart and wanting the other people within that community to do really, really well.
And what's great about it is that when we don't have it, like by week 3 of that thing, you can't wait to the next one because everyone wants to get back together. The Humans Talks happen on a Monday evening at the Square Club. It's the 3rd Monday of every month. It's free. It's a free event that you can come. Obviously, the Catalyst thing is a join-in fee for that, and they can get involved, and obviously buying the books if you want. But how does people get in touch with you, Olly? What's the simplest, quickest way for them to touch base with you? Social media, that sort of stuff. What do you want to just share?
Yeah, so you can go through the Humans website. Humans has got the 4 in the middle, so you'll find us relatively easy. You can also follow us on social media at Be Humankind. Or you can email catalyst@humans.co.uk.
Cool. And then the last thing, just to wrap up, is, what would you say to someone that was in that situation, working at McDonald's, listening to this podcast? Now you almost like life on the other side, so to speak. What would you say to them now if you were now mentoring them? You've driven past in your car, you've ordered your Happy Meal or whatever, and they look pretty upset. So what would you say to them?
I think I'd say go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I don't think it matters whether you're working at McDonald's or the CEO of a huge business. What I've found through the work that I've done and research that's out there is that actually, when you think about success, most people don't feel it.
Yeah.
And so we have this inherent process as a society that actually, once we've achieved something, we don't sit there and enjoy it. We find a new goal.
Yeah.
And so success is this far away in the future thing that nobody ever catches, that pursuit of happiness as it's called. And so what I found, and one of the quotes I heard was the difference between somebody that's successful and somebody that's unsuccessful is that a successful person builds a life they want to live and then gives themselves the space to live it.
Wow. Okay.
An unsuccessful person builds a life they want to live and then keeps working and striving and driving and never give themselves the chance to actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'd say to the person at McDonald's or the CEO of a big business is that actually happiness exists right now and where you are.
Yeah.
It's not this point in the future, it's now. And if you can't find it now, you're never going to find it. And so if I've learned anything, happiness exists in the heart and it exists in the head. It doesn't exist in the external world.
Yeah.
And so I found happiness at McDonald's in strange ways.
Yeah.
And I think what I have now is a level of happiness that most people don't feel. And that's not because I'm rich or famous or any of those things that we attribute to success. It's because I'm really comfortable with who I am.
Yeah.
I'm really comfortable with where I am. And I'm really comfortable with why I'm here. And that's when we think about humans, what we want to help other people to find.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Olly, it's been absolutely awesome. Good to chat, good to hang out, and good to talk about your journey of how humans come about and how you're impacting people on a regular basis. So thank you. And thank you for challenging me on that. Are you an entrepreneur or business owner? Because that's set me on a journey. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. So thank you.
Thank you very much.